there's just so many different ways and different personalities that get there. And it's tough to really kind of say like what the one X factor is. But I would say one of the things would be consistency. And I think that people have a very poor job of evaluating themselves on consistency. So
I always think back to that clip on ESPN where LeBron James literally recited verbatim what happened on a play in like the third quarter of a playoff game. I don't think there's many players out there that can recollect, oh, that guy threw me a curveball on a 2-1 count.
right.
You talked about the defense. You keep on saying defense, defense, defense.
I always think this, like you typically know what you have offensively from a player. Like a player is once, like we want to put him in the lineup because he can hit, like we get it. But it usually comes down to, well, where's he going to play? We don't have like that many openings. Like our best player is playing left or short or third. We, as coaches, as players, we always want to play the premier positions. But, and I agree, but that shouldn't be the only position that we play. And I think a lot of it is ego-centered. You know, if you're a parent, you always want your kid to play shortstop or be the number one pitcher.
Or they like, we only pick shortstops. Well, yeah, he's athlete.
Yeah.
But also there's some other positions out there. And if he's able to play other positions outside of shortstop.
Yeah. Again, going back to position versatility, the more positions you can play, the better it is for your career. And I just think that a lot of times it really does come down to defense because we already pretty much know what's going on offensively.
Let's finish it.
Yeah. Ay, coming in. Yeah. Flex. I just wanna win. Yeah. LABB, who we running with. Yeah. 2233, I'm on 10 again. Yeah. State your name.
Jason, what's up, man?
What's going on, Spiker?
It's been a minute, and you're now here in the flesh. Last time I was staring at you while you were in Florida. You don't have that glowing tan anymore.
Nope. I'm adjusted to the winter here in St. Louis, that's for sure.
And it's been we were talking about this before we started. It's been a mild winter so far, so you haven't really experienced the true St. Louis spirit here yet.
Exactly. I can handle 30s, but once it gets lower, it's I don't miss this weather.
Guys, what is up? This is a new episode of The Closing Pitch. Jason, as promised, from episode 24, How Good Could You Be? He said that he would come back onto the show, and here he is, and I appreciate the time, and I know that you're going to be heading down to Florida soon with spring training and with Manfred's new press release. That's probably good news for you.
Oh, yeah. Appreciate you having me. Always enjoyed talking with you, so I'm excited.
Were you kind of sweating bullets a little bit with, like, if this is this actually going to happen?
You know, I don't know. I guess I'm a little bit more optimistic than most. I was just preparing like it was going to, and that was more of just confirmation that it's going to happen. But you never know. I mean, a lot of things can happen between now and then, but I'm still preparing like it's going to start on time.
Guys, if you don't know, if you haven't listened to episode 24 yet, please do. He goes deep into player development, and we talk a lot about data and how things are trending in the professional realm. And Jason is a minor league coordinator for the Houston Astros. Can you go in a little bit depth of that? I don't even want to like try to explain it. I don't want to like butcher it. And you're like, Spiker, that's not what I do.
Yeah. So pretty much like a lot of organizations have what they call a field coordinator. We call it the fundamentals coordinator. So for spring training, I'll do the schedule for all the minor league guys. I'll go to big league spring training and help with the bench coach and their staff with running that spring training and, you know, coach our minor league guys that are up there. And then all throughout the season, I kind of travel around to each affiliate and make sure, you know, everything's kind of going according to plan and seeing what we need to adjust and communicating with the coaches and the players every day. And it's just a little bit of everything. You kind of have your hands in each basket.
Can you go into like the hierarchy of major league organizations? Because whenever I've been in baseball since I've ever started, right? When I've ever picked up a ball. And I still don't understand. Maybe it's because they try to do it like a corporate structure, and also names change. Like you just said, like, oh, we call ours the fundamental guy, yeah. And then someone could say it's a field coordinator. Can you kind of go through and how that hierarchy works?
Yeah, so it kind of depends on each organization, like you said. So ours is a little bit thinner than most. So you obviously have different departments. So from the player acquisition or development side, you may have player acquisition, which is scouting. You have all your scouts over there, advanced scouts, that type of thing. With us on my department is player development. You have your GM who underneath him is our assistant GM who he is also our farm director, which typically you have multiple people that do those roles, and the farm director just oversees the whole operation. So it's called a farm director, but it's the actual title is director of player development. So that's like the guy who's everyone's boss, and he'll report to the assistant GM who reports.
So technically he's the head of minor leagues?
Yeah, he's typically the head of minor leagues. And then alongside of him, you may have R&D, so research and development, which they may go into all of those aspects. So they may not be in one of those departments because they could do a lot in scouting, a lot in game evaluation, certain things like that for the major league teams. So they do a little bit of all of that. So on the minor league side, we'll work with them a lot on just different ideas we have that we want to be researched or whatever it might be. So just to recap, so then you have your GM, your assistant GM.
I'm trying to think of it's like a triangle, right?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
So GM, assistant GM,
Yes.
farm director, and then you have your coordinators, which is where I am. So some teams do it where they have a ton of coordinators. Some teams have very minimal. So we have, I think, 3 or 4 total. Some teams have upwards of 10, 15 to 20.
And do those coordinators specialize in certain things?
Yeah. So for example, we'll have strength and conditioning coordinator or a pitching coordinator hitting, but some teams may have an assistant of this, an assistant of that. We don't typically have it that way. Some people may have a infield coordinator and then a lower level infield coordinator. That's kind of wrapped up into my realm as well as outfield and base running and those. So it just kind of depends how it's structured. And then alongside that is where all the coaches are. So, I speak with the managers of each of the teams every day, and then the hitting coordinator will speak to all the hitting coaches, the pitching coordinator will speak to all the pitching coaches. And so that's kind of how ours is structured. Some teams may have a couple other layers involved in there, or, they may have 3 or 4 pitching coordinators, but
who hires and fires those managers at the minor league levels?
So it's typically the farm director. So farm director is who I would report to. In our case, the farm director is also our assistant general manager. So it's kind of a collaboration of those aspects. So that's part of my role is to help develop the managers into what we project them to be, and really individualize their own development plan too, because we always think about player development, but how do we develop coaches? How do we develop people in that realm too?
So then on player acquisitions and player decisions, who ends up making those choices?
So you're talking about moving players up and down? And
Yeah. So obviously the farm director and the GM will make the decisions on the manager. We really like this guy, so let's move him up into AAA or wherever. Yeah. Or we'll hire him as the bench coach for Major League Baseball.
Yeah, so it's kind of a combination. So the farm director may have some ideas, but it kind of comes, that's part of one of my roles, at least on the position player side, is okay, we had an injury here. These are a couple options we're looking at, and we kind of have a group of people that may, chime in and, maybe we have a group message and it's, it's these 3 guys. Who do you think? This is what we think. This is what we're probably going to go with. Does anybody object? And so that's one of my responsibilities. And, a lot of times the managers can help us out there too, because, they're around those guys every day. If we're only there, a couple of times a month or whatever it might be, it's kind of hard to really see it all.
So then what's the role of the manager in hindsight? What is his, even at the major league level down to rookie ball, what is really his criteria? Because you were a manager, right?
Yeah. So it kind of depends. In our organization, they run the daily schedule. They're the defensive coach, the ultimate leader guy. I always say they're the glue that holds the operation together. So they have to be really on the same page with the hitting and pitching coach and be their backbone, because, a lot of times if a player doesn't want to maybe do what the pitching coach or hitting coach is asking, he may need somebody to talk to, and you got to make sure that the manager's on the same page and can help push those things forward, especially because players move up and down a lot. You may have, my first year, I think we had 65 different players. So you don't necessarily always get to know the guys that well right away. So everybody kind of working as a unit is very important. And I think that all kind of falls on the manager to kind of set that tone.
What are you saying about what are you seeing on this trend where major league teams, I don't know if you can answer. If you can't answer, just say like, Spike, that's a dumb question. Don't ask that ever again because I'm going to get fired for if I answer this question. But like, what do you see in this trend with like Bodie and those guys getting picked up and they had no professional experience whatsoever in baseball, but now they're in Major League Baseball. And I mean, frankly, I think it's pretty cool. You get to see a guy that's put a lot of his heart and soul into something, and he has a successful product. And now Major League Baseball is now entering these guys into the league.
Yeah, I think it just kind of depends what the organization is after and what they feel like could be the biggest benefit. For us particularly, we have people that have never worked in baseball before at any level. People all over the world, because people that maybe worked in rugby or European soccer can maybe give us a little bit different of a perspective than even somebody owning a private baseball facility that's progressive. So we try to look at everything from every perspective that we possibly can, and we know that there's blinders and everything. So it's awesome that the industry is allowing people of all sorts of different backgrounds a chance to prove themselves and see what value they can bring. And I think that's what it all comes down to. It's not necessarily just about fitting in. It's about, what value can you bring the organization that they don't already have.
Go into this rugby route. We talked about this 2 weeks ago in lunch, and I didn't I didn't dive into it. I wish I would have asked more questions. Our conversation, how our conversations go, they end up going completely. Yeah. We'll talk about baseball and this thing. Yeah. We're talking about like stocks and investments. What's this rugby thing? Why did you guys choose to bring on a rugby person?
I think it kind of depended, and it seemed like a good fit just by the way the technology that they were using in the weight room and just the way that some of these guys were thinking. I can remember my first time meeting one of the guys that we had hired in rugby, and I was actually going over video. Like, he just kind of introduced himself in the middle of a meeting, and we were going over video of a player's like secondary lead, or just lead in general, and he was like wondering like something as simple as like, why are his feet still? Like, why aren't his feet more stagnant? And I just certain things that you just kind of oversee just because we've been trained to think that that's just normal. That's how we've done it.
Well, Ricky Henderson did it. He was at standstill.
Right. Exactly. So it's like baseball has, become really progressive, but there's still certain things that we have our blinders on for. And, it's been largely beneficial for myself as well, just to kind of take a step back and actually question why we do things the way that we do.
So these guys, is it normal now where we're trying to bring in a totally different perspective altogether? Or is it still kind of like we don't want to go too far off in the deep end?
It kind of depends. Like, we have a pretty good balance. Like, we have guys that played in the major leagues for a long time. We have guys that never worked in baseball before.
What's the work dynamic on that?
Yeah,
I could only imagine. How we are with baseball people. Like, we can get pretty tribal and get our egos and get peacock where we pump out our chest. What does that like mean? Like, all right, guys. We brought in, I don't even know what his name is. Let's just say Zane. I think that's a good rugby name. This is Zane, and he is now our strength and conditioning guy, and he has no experience. He's from Europe.
Yeah. So I've always thought about it like, at first it probably was weird. It was probably weird that, even myself got hired in who didn't play professionally and was a younger guy. And so I think that I used to be that guy. And so I think now that the industry has kind of changed, it at first was probably odd, and now it's kind of like, oh, all right, whatever. And you just kind of move on, and you get to try to know the person. But I definitely think there's probably an adjustment period at first. But I think for me, it wasn't that big of a deal, just because I was that type of person at one point or another in this process.
Because the goal, I guess the end goal and I think you can only talk about the Houston Astros, but the end goal is to try to get the best product onto the field, right?
Yes.
And is it championships, or is it just making sure that you have an entertaining product for your fans?
Well, I think it kind of depends. Like, we would like to say championships, but you can't always control everything. So it's just looking at a player from every perspective and seeing how we can help them from every regard, whether it's mental, physical, on the field, off the field, and hopefully, what we produce ends up with championships. But, we always try to look at it as more process-oriented goals instead of outcome-oriented, because if we're doing everything that we can, hopefully the championships are what comes with it.
Minor leagues. We talked about it briefly with Manfred coming out with that new statement saying spring training's heading in the right direction, right?
Mm-hmm.
Minor leagues have been cut back dramatically.
Mm-hmm.
What's the game plan? What's the thought process behind that? Are we going to see these minor league teams coming back, or is this just we're living with the new norm right now?
I think we're probably living with the new norm. In our organization, after the 2017 season, we had kind of already trimmed it down a little bit. So
is that a cost standpoint? Or is it more like this guy's not going to make it? Why are we wasting our time with and wasting his time on this?
It's probably a combination of a lot of different things. Cost is maybe part of the reason, but I just think at some point there's just so many players, it just becomes a little bit difficult to really have the impact that you need to have on a group of people when there's just a lot more people kind of around. I think about the lower levels, and there's just so many of the lower levels that people maybe don't realize. So just to give you an example, like if you're an international player and you sign when you can on July 2nd, which is the signing date, you then will play in kind of like a practice league called the Tricky League. And then the next year you'll probably play in the Dominican Summer League.
So wait, where's the Tricky League at?
The Tricky League is just in the Dominican. It's more so just practice games. Like there's not even a box score or anything like that. Kind of like a college fall ball type of thing. And then
that season's what, like 2 months?
Yeah, probably about 2 months.
Okay.
And then
what's the time frame? When do they usually play that?
So usually if there's a J2 signing, it'll be July, August in that realm, and you'll just play on the fields at the academies. And some teams sign a lot more international players than others, so some teams may play a lot more games than the others.
Got it.
So it just kind of depends, because you have a certain amount of money that you're allotted, and if you spend a lot of it on one player, you may have a smaller class, or maybe you spread it out so your class is bigger that year.
Okay.
So if you're an international player, that's probably your first year. Then your next year you play in the Dominican Summer League. Then you may come.
And that's like a 3-month time frame, 4-month.
Yeah,
time frame.
yeah.
It's more of a longer season.
Yeah, exactly.
And you're actually keeping box score at that point.
Yeah, it's their first regular season. And then for us, we have the GCL, or for the teams in Arizona, the Arizona League. So then the players would come there. And some teams have, maybe 2 DSL teams, Dominican Summer Leagues, or 2 GCL. So it may take you, 1 to 2 to 3 years even to navigate through that. And then, some teams have, a couple other rookie ball affiliates. So you may have the Appalachian League and then the New York Penn League. And this is all before you even get to single A.
And what type of players would you say are in that bucket?
It kind of depends. It's a combination of international players, but also a combination of high school kids that were drafted.
But like skill set wise,
I
want to go more specific. Like skill set wise, kind of give more of a context to the conversation.
It kind of depends. So like a lot of these guys have maybe 1 or 2 elite major league tools. Some maybe are more balanced and have a little bit of all of them. And it's just sometimes teaching them about the game, because some guys maybe weren't as fortunate as some of us to play tournaments a lot growing up. So it's just kind of a different structure, and a lot of the players are really raw. So the age range is typically 16 to probably 20 in that range. So when I think about that, it's like at 16 I'm a junior in high school or whatever it is. So instead of high school baseball for some of the international kids, this is like what we have to kind of teach them the game. So it's a lot of development, a little bit less, games compared to the rest of the minor leagues. But
are these guys getting paid for this, or is it all amateur, or what is it?
Well, yeah, because they're all signed. So it's just like, they could be in AAA, they could be in AA. It's just, they're in our organization, and, they get the same treatment as everyone else.
Gotcha. Okay. And so then now you're getting into single A.
Mm-hmm.
Talk a little bit more about that single A type of player. They have the fundamentals down at that point.
It kind of depends. So I would say, and this is my personal opinion, people may disagree. I would say short season, like the New York Penn League, is equivalent to, your Power 5 conferences. I would say a lot of hitters maybe struggle that were really good at the Power 5 level, more so because it's their first time hitting with a wood bat. There's so many different elements involved. So then I would say, moving on from that, like low A would be above the SEC level. Some people would probably disagree, but I think that low A is very raw. So you may see a lot of velo. You may see mid to upper 90s, even guys throwing 100, but maybe they don't throw any strikes or they don't have a secondary pitch. Or you may see a guy with elite power, but he's striking out a lot or making a bunch of errors. So
when you mean secondary pitch, he has a secondary pitch, but it's not an effective secondary pitch.
Right.
He's not locating it consistently. It could have some really good break, but it's not necessarily up to par at the major league level because you're comparing. Tell me if I'm wrong. You're comparing everything at a major league standard.
Correct. Yeah. So when players are drafted or signed and, we're thinking about their future, it's not necessarily the level that they're at because we're not trying to make the best minor league players. We're trying to make the best major league players.
So even when a scout goes to see a kid, he's scouting with the eyes of if this kid got into an MLB stadium, how would he do? Correct.
Yes. And a lot of it is, future, where we think this guy could be in the future because, does this guy seem like he's more maxed out? Is he, what can we do from a development standpoint to get him to, actually get to that point? And I think that that's the toughest part sometimes when you think about a lot of elite players that maybe don't get drafted is, maybe they were the best player in their particular league or their particular college conference, but, maybe their tools don't really project, at that level, but maybe a player who didn't quite perform as well, maybe gets drafted or gets picked higher that, maybe has more upside. And, when you think about like a long-term investment, that's why sometimes those decisions are made.
So would you say that every guy in the draft, there's a possibility? Like that's the goal is like, okay,
absolutely.
Even if it's like number 32, I see some type of upside here where one of these skills that he has could play on a major league field right now.
Absolutely. And, sometimes you may even see where, a guy maybe doesn't have that one particular tool, but maybe he has a little bit of all of them. So it's worth like, maybe, if he gets a little bit, more in this area or this area, it's like, he has enough to get him there because he's more well-rounded of a player. Maybe he could be a utility player, all sorts of different factors with that.
Where does COVID put the draft right now?
Honestly, not too sure. It's almost like everyone's taking it a step at a time. It's like last year at this time, everything was on schedule. Then COVID hits, and it's like everything was kind of all right. Spring training comes first for this. Now we're going to figure out the draft. Now we're going to figure out here. And so I think that's kind of what boat we're kind of working with now is spring training is first on the order of operations. Once we get through that, we kind of get an idea of what's happening. Then maybe we'll move on to the draft. But that's just kind of the vibe that I get from it.
Do you think you guys are going to use all your rounds at this point, or is it going to be one of those things where like we have no idea what's going to happen with this minor league, so we're probably going to draft just the guys that we know is going to make an impact?
I don't know. It's so wide open. I would honestly say that probably most scouts are just still going through their rankings like they normally would, and then whenever we get there, we'll kind of have to see what the guidelines are around all of that. So I think it's still scouting the way it's always been, and then we'll have the rankings, and then kind of see where it goes. On
draft day, this came up in my head because I went through the draft process, didn't get picked up, but went through the draft process, and from a player's side, I've never realized or understood the organizational side of things. Mm-hmm. So on draft day, what's going on during that time?
It's tough. Like I haven't been really too involved in most of that, just because we're typically like, like in season or whatnot. So it kind of seems like a lot of the homework's already kind of done ahead of time. And then it's kind of like, where each guy gets picked. And
is it a war room? Like, is it like we're in a conference room and we're listening to the different calls, and then we're crossing off names, and then we end up making our decision when it comes to our choice? Yeah, I know what a lot of teams do is they have like whiteboards with magnets, and they have the name on the magnet, but then they have all these little symbols and letters and colors just to kind of organize it all. Just because
baseball has so many rounds and there's so many players, and you just want to make sure you have it all organized in kind of like a simple way. Obviously, this last year was crazy because it was remote, but that's typically how a lot of teams do it with the magnets, because it's just kind of the easiest to organize.
Minor league players have not played a season in a year. It's safe to say year and a half when they first step on the field.
Mm-hmm.
Are you nervous about spring training and getting out there and then seeing the guys in like the evaluation side? Because like it's almost like you have to go in with a different lens,
mm-hmm.
and you can't be as critical, right? Because they haven't stepped on a field.
Right. So, kind of the way that we look at it, or myself really, because I'm, kind of preparing for the scheduling it, is, trying to organize, our groups around this year being around like what these guys were allowed to do, based on their living environments, during this time. So, for example, the Dominican Republic just instituted a new curfew where, a lot of these guys can't really even get outside to a field, as to where, certain states around the United States, it's not that strict. So certain guys are allowed to get more work done. So I don't know that it's necessarily fair to have those guys in the same group. So it's a lot of legwork on finding what each guy is really doing and then pairing them up to kind of give them a good build-up. Because, when you really think about, during this time, you may be getting your work and maybe going to get maybe you're going to hit for an hour or, lift for an hour, but you're not standing out in the sun all day for multiple days in a row and doing, work. So I think simply just getting used to being in the heat all day, that we're normally used to, I think will even wear people out. So what I'm trying to do is, make it more gradual, maybe give more off days, more half days, more meetings, just to kind of get everybody's bodies just kind of, readjusted to that whole environment.
Is injury rate is popping into your head? Like, is those conversations happening because they haven't been exposed to high intense situations?
Yeah, so
because it's so hard. Like you're in a cage for a full year and a half,
and as air conditioning, heat,
and as much as you're trying to simulate it, like I always find that funny with the simulation. Like you can't really simulate that experience,
right?
So. Is that a conversation that's being had?
Yeah, and it's conversation. It's been a lot of research that we've kind of done on stoppages of play and just the history of sports. Every lockout that's been, other pandemics, worldwide, and looking at the injury rates and what type of injuries. So typically, it's a lot of soft tissue injuries, hamstrings, Achilles,
pulled muscles,
pulled muscles, tears.
Oh, really?
So. Our number one thing right now would be just to try to get guys healthy and adjusted. And hopefully, we can develop them as the players too. But, if we hit the gas too hard, too quickly, these guys' bodies aren't going to be ready. So, this is where technology can help us out a lot too. Our guys wear these catapult sensors underneath their jersey that, a lot of European soccer and basketball players wear. And, it gives us a little bit of information on, which guys are, more worn out than others. It's a huge tool, especially during this time.
Is catapult kind of like Whoop?
A little bit like it. Whoop kind of seems like it measures your recovery. This one kind of measures, in game, kind of what your body's doing. But it's more so just when you're at the field and that type of thing.
Dig down a little bit deeper on like the catapult side of things. Can they measure like injuries and everything like that, like muscle function, or is it less than that? Like, I'm trying to wrap my head around this thing.
Yeah, it kind of depends. It depends how often they wear it. If we know,
it's something that you wear around your chest.
So basically, guys may have an undershirt and there's a little pocket on the back with a little sensor, maybe a couple inches big, and it'll go, right underneath your neck on your back. And it's a little pocket. The players don't even feel that they're wearing it. It can tell us like it's more of like a GPS, like how much did you run, how fast, what was the intensity, and then hopefully it's a player that we've had for long enough to where we know what his regular numbers are like. So then we know if Spiker hit 4 doubles and I struck out 4 times, you may be a little bit more tired tomorrow than I would be because you were going home to second all those times and I was just walking back to the dugout. So it helps us in that regard, because we may say like, okay, this guy's played 8 games in a row, this other guy's played 8 games in a row, who needs the off day? But it might be different, or you may be playing in the outfield and have to sprint after a bunch of doubles in the gap, and if I'm playing first base, I maybe didn't have to get as involved with some of that. So there's just so much. There's so much just within each game and each individual. So that's where that can help us, and hopefully it's a tool for us, come spring training time.
I feel like this is a good segue into the conversation we had 2 weeks ago on switching positions and how you guys are thinking about position switching. I feel like it's probably Catapult has given you a lot more information about. We all know the whole, if you can't pick it on the middle infield, outfield is where middle infielders die, right? That's the whole joke, right? But now you guys are thinking about it kind of totally different, where you're bringing an outfielder into the infield.
Yeah, so it kind of depends. If it's a guy that profiles like he has a strong arm and he has, kind of elite speed laterally, it's, those are two of the harder things to teach, and hands and actions like that are obviously very, very important. But, in a development aspect, that's probably a little bit, easier to develop than teaching someone, range or arm strength. So it kind of depends if there's players that kind of fit the profile. But, more so than anything, I always look at, position versatility as, it's better for the guys' careers, because you never know who's going to be injured on what day or who's kind of banged up. And, if you're an infielder and you can play a little bit of outfield, even if you're a really good infielder, you never know what that'll do for you. And, maybe for a month period, you have to play left field or center, and that gets you in the lineup more, which, can impact your career. But more than anything, add value to the team and the organization. And that's what it's all about.
Because your goal is to try to get those guys to the show however you can. I mean, and I'm sure, which I find funny, because when you get to the younger levels, a player's like, oh, that's not my position. And they fight you tooth and nail. But when the stakes are a little bit higher of you making it to the show and possibly making $500,000 from the get-go, or even more $500,000. I don't know what the minimum is now. I mean, the incentive is a little bit better. Like, hey, you want to play shortstop? Yes, I want to play shortstop. I was hoping you'd ask me.
Yep. And I would say that the thing about it that, our perspective is now is, obviously everyone's goal and dream is to get to the show, but the hardest thing to do is to stay there. And the more positions you can play, the more valuable you'll be, because, maybe you're not an everyday player. Maybe you're, coming off the bench, but, if there's a chance to pinch hit, but then, they need to put somebody in left field and you've only ever played shortstop in your life, it's a little bit tougher to feel confident in doing that. But, if you have some experience doing that, before you get to that level, then maybe the manager feels comfortable doing that. And, maybe you get a couple hits and you stick around for longer, and then maybe that turns into years, which, you never know where it goes from there. And when you just think about value, what's the downside in learning how to play more positions?
What's the actual average range of someone staying in the show when they get called up?
I'm not sure. I don't know this, but my guess would be like MLB careers on average are maybe 3 years long.
That's not very long.
It's not very long. And, we want to think about the guys that have played for 15, 20 years. But what about that guy, when you were watching a game and he came off the bench for his major league debut, and maybe that was the only time he played in the show. And so you just never know how long it's going to last. And, I think about just playing the odds. If the more positions you play, the more you can do on a field, the more that, people may need you in different realms.
It's that probability, right? I mean, there's so many dudes that end up getting it to the show. They're there for that September call up, and then the next thing you know, we never hear their name ever again.
Yep.
Or even like the guy that's the pinch runner for the playoff push.
Yep.
I forgot what Cardinals team it was, but it was a story where one of the guys who was a huge pinch runner during that World Series run, and he didn't make the squad for the NLCS, and they ended up winning. He was at the Fridays across the street for the Busch Stadium, but he was in the NLDS.
Yeah.
So he had to watch the NLCS in a Fridays while his team's playing. and they make the World Series and he ends up getting the call to come back onto the squad. But
Yep.
I just find that so weird.
Yep.
That you have, like, what industry do you have a job? You're at the highest level and you are winning, helping a team go for a championship. And then they say, oh, we don't need you for these 2 weeks. We're going to furlough you.
Yep.
And then we're going to hire you back when the World Series starts.
It's crazy. And it just can show you how quickly things can change and how ruthless it can be, and that's just within days, maybe like, 2 days ago you were the man scoring the run, and then 2 days later you're not even on the roster. But that just tells you how competitive it is and how many good players there are.
The reward that you get for being in the show, and then obviously if you even make a debut, you have a name and you can put that on the resume. Even in minor league baseball, that's a big thing. If you put down like, oh, I was with the Houston Astros or the St. Louis Cardinals, or I played in independent baseball, whatever the case may be, because it means you're a top percenter, right?
Right.
But that reward and that risk is it's a very funny little line that guys play, because then once they're done, they got to figure out, okay, what do I do next?
Right. Absolutely.
How did you handle that when, and obviously each guy has their own story on playing, because everyone thinks that they're going to the show, right? I mean, that was the big thing. Like,
yeah,
everyone raised their hand, like, who wants to play Major League Baseball? And all of us raise our hand.
Yeah.
Like, all right, maybe none of you are going to be making it to the show.
Yep.
How did you approach it because we were talking about Tommy John, you had Tommy John, and you went through that whole medical sales experience.
Yeah.
Like, how did you handle that?
I definitely can realize now, like, I wasn't good enough. And I think sometimes it's hard to admit that or look at it face on. But, I get to spend time around the best players in the world, and it's pretty clear to me at this point. But
by the way, my mother-in-law asked, like, oh, why don't you play baseball anymore? I was like, I wasn't good enough. And literally the conversation just ended. Like, it was like dead silence at the dinner table. Like, everyone didn't know what to say. Like, And I was like, no, it's all right, guys. Like, it's fine. Don't worry about it. Like, they think about it as like a corporate 500 job. Like, oh, I got fired.
Right. Exactly. It's tough, and it's a wild experience. But yeah, so when I had Tommy John, I was in medical sales for an internship while I was rehabbing, and I always knew I wanted to coach, but that experience for me definitely made me realize I need to make whatever sacrifices I do need to make it work financially as well. So
you had to figure out those numbers, and then you're like, yeah, this is definitely doable.
Yeah, it was like, all right, I need to live on the edge for a while and kind of bet on myself and see if I can do this for jobs with no salary for multiple years, and see if I could do lessons on the side and work camps, and all that experience was awesome. I've met a lot of great people, learned a lot of great valuable life lessons, and it's kind of led me to where I am today. Did you have that choice?
Like, did you have that inclination when you were playing, or did you were just playing and having fun and had no idea what you wanted to do?
Well, I think I wasn't sure. I definitely wanted to work in sports. I didn't know if I wanted to work in a front office or if I wanted to be a coach. And I think, going through the college baseball playing experience, I would always kind of put myself in the coach's perspective a lot and wonder if that was kind of for me. And at the time I was like, you know what, I want to give this a shot and see if this is something I can do. And I definitely think that kind of helped get me kind of into it to start it. And I think when I had Tommy John for that year period, I'm going to the field every day, but I'm not able to perform. So it was my first time sitting on the other side of the table. And I think that perspective kind of helped my coaching thoughts kind of start sooner than when you normally do as a player. So I think that was kind of the intro into okay, I want to do this, but what does that mean? What are my thoughts? What are my beliefs? What can I take from this experience I currently have? And that was actually one large benefit of actually having Tommy John, was going through that experience.
We talked about Catapult and how soccer players are using that system, right? But what's really interesting about soccer that I'm surprised, in my opinion, I've talked about this on the podcast. I don't know if it ever will happen, but it's very interesting, is this U18 type of situation where we're starting to see colleges getting a little bit more inflated on pricing, and it's expensive to go to school, right? Mm-hmm. And then the whole cerveza sickness, and people are now staying at home on a Zoom call, and they're actually paying a school for Zoom when they could actually go online, go to YouTube, go to Kane Academy, or even buy master classes online and get the same education that they might get from a university. Do you think there's ever a chance that Major League Baseball will ever go down the U18 route or U16, or do you think that's far-fetched?
My personal opinion would be it's kind of far-fetched just because we already have like a really strong system as far as college baseball and junior college and high school travel ball. So the segue is kind of already there as far as the way the development systems are happening. And when you really look at it from this perspective of Major League Baseball teams are taking coaches from these academies that are developing these players and hiring them themselves, it kind of shows you that the structure is already there and it's already very successful and very good industry. So I personally don't see where it would be necessary for these organizations to continue going that route,
because they're not in that business, right? It's not where they're going to get the profit. They're going to get the profit from the big money is going to be from the TV deals and getting people into the stadium and watching their product on the field, right? So I guess it makes sense. And you're saying that the youth baseball amateur side, these big organizations like the Rawlings Tigers, or you substitute the name in the national programs, they have good enough coaches that are supplying these players with the information that they need.
Yeah, absolutely. Like it's already there, and it's like kind of lucky for all these organizations that we have something as good as that. And
so it's almost like Major League Baseball is benefiting from it without the cost. They're kind of reducing the cost, or reducing their bottom line, and they're still able to get the talent. The talent's not teetering off; it's actually upticking.
Right. Yeah. And I think there's just a lot of other things that Major League Baseball has to think about with that too. Like there's a players union, like where does that fit in? Are they technically signed players? Like I think there's so much in the language of all of that too, that plays an impact in some of those decisions.
Have you ever looked at like how Premier League has set that up, or MLS? Have you ever looked at that?
No, I've never really looked at the fine details, but
like
I know
if it's
that
like amateur status or if it's like pro status.
Yeah, I'm sure it's probably some combination of what you're saying.
Because you guys had draft and follows a long time ago, right?
Yeah.
What the draft and follow was, we draft you and then you end up going to school.
Yeah, and I think hockey actually kind of works that way a little bit. So you may draft a guy, but they're using college hockey as kind of a minor league system in some regard with that too, as to where obviously baseball and most sports are the opposite, where you may be drafted after you perform and have proven yourself in college.
So with the decrease of minor league teams, you've already said, like, yeah, this is the new norm. There's probably not going to be an increase of teams. It's actually going to be a decrease of teams and really constrict it. Does that mean that there's going to be more players at the junior college level that could possibly get drafted?
Yeah, I think it's going to make all the levels a lot stronger and a lot better. I think the number one most impactful thing would probably be independent ball. So I think that a lot of players that would normally be taken in the later rounds that are good enough, like there's quite a few stories of guys taken in the later rounds that make it to the major leagues. I think that they will then transition over to independent ball until they prove that they're good enough to then be picked up by a major league team. So I think that independent ball is going to be increasingly more competitive. And then
is Major League Baseball affiliating with any of these these independent ball teams?
Yeah.
For those that are listening that don't know what independent baseball is, it's just like how it sounds. It's independent from affiliated baseball. It doesn't mean that it's necessarily a bad brand of baseball. There's some really bad independent teams and players that shouldn't probably be playing professional baseball, but then there's a lot of really good independent ball teams. Really like good. I remember playing against John Rodriguez, who was in the World Series about 5 years ago, and he was playing with the Wichita Wingnuts, and I was like, holy smokes, this is crazy.
Yeah. It's crazy. Like, there's good players everywhere, and it's tough to always measure them, at every level. Like you brought up junior college, I think the pandemic is going to make junior college baseball better than it's ever been. And I've always been a huge advocate of junior college baseball. I coached at Heartland Community College for one semester, and I do see the benefits of that level, and you see a ton of talent, and now it's going to be even more talent because you're going to see a lot of freshmen that maybe don't don't get the playing time that they wanted at the 4-year school they were going to go to, just because now you're competing against guys not only 3 years older than you, but now 4 years. And, that's a place where, a lot of times you can get playing time. It's more affordable. There's just a lot of benefits to it. And I would be like a huge advocate for junior college baseball. And I think there's going to be a ton of great players now.
How does a scout see a high school player? Like, do they go to high school events, or do they rely on their network to really give them an idea on high school players?
It's a combination. So, I think all the teams have scouts that spread out to a lot of the events, and then they also have their own network because they need to know all the ins and outs about each guy. And
that's a big task. Like you have
so many.
High school baseball, you have junior college baseball. I mean, junior college baseball in of itself, it's a beast because there's so many different teams, right? And very spread out as well.
Yeah.
And then you have your Division III, Division II, and Division I. I mean, that's a big task.
Yeah, it's a wide network, and especially depending on what area of the country you're scouting, you may have way more teams. Like for example, California, I think, has like 110 junior colleges. So
no way.
Maybe certain teams have multiple scouts that just cover California. So it kind of depends how the organizations are structured. I think front offices have like added what we would maybe say like an advanced scout to maybe dive through some of the numbers a little bit more to give some type of baseline. But I think that it'll never be lost to see players play in person, and there's just so much that you can find out about a guy, in person.
Because your scouting structure, tell me if these terms are wrong. It might be just slang that I've heard just being in a dugout and like, oh, did you see that guy? He has a Bluetooth headset on. That's a scout.
Yeah.
Bird dog, and then area. And is there like a district guy too? Like I just butchered that. Please explain.
So it kind of depends. I don't spend too much time on with the scouting side, but I think each organization is a little bit different. So we have like from the top down would be your scouting director or your assistant GM who is in player acquisition who makes those decisions.
And he's at the front office. He's at the big club. He's at, like for you, it'd be he's in Houston.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then he may travel around and see a bunch of these guys, but you may have your area supervisors who, he has his area scouts underneath him, and the area scouts may see a guy and write a report and may say something like, hey, like I really like this guy. I've seen him a bunch. Like maybe you should fly in and check this guy out and get your thoughts on him too.
Okay, so right now we have the GM, we have the area supervisor, and then you have area scouts below that guy. And then what's after that?
It depends. Like like you said, some teams may have bird dog scouts. Some people may not even have that. It may just be the relationships that they all build.
And bird dog scouts are the guys that show up for like an inning and then they leave.
The bird dog scouts are a lot of times like maybe somebody who runs an academy or works for maybe he's a high school coach and he's maybe works for a specific team, and if he comes across a guy who will just recommend it to that particular scout, just in case that scout doesn't already know about the guy anyways. I don't know if we have those in our organization or not. I know a lot of organizations do have those, but it kind of depends. But along with the scouts, you also have like your advanced scouts who are also maybe just looking at video of these guys and then looking at their numbers.
So area scout, then advanced scouts below that.
So they'll kind of be on the same wavelength.
Okay.
So they'll kind of work hand in hand. So, we may want to get an evaluation from, a numbers perspective, also a video perspective, and also like in person. That way you can get, different views and opinions with different people because, maybe you're biased on one particular characteristic that you really like, but maybe someone else feels different. So it's important to have multiple sets of eyes on these guys just to.
Would the advanced scout be like a guy that's really big in the analytics and video?
Yeah.
He's not necessarily looking at the player on the field, or
he would be looking at it on like video. So
okay, got you.
Like for example, he may watch video of that Mizzou play on the SEC network, and maybe break down a guy's swing and see how it projects. Or he may just get video that the scout saw in person and then take a peek at it and implement it into the scouting evaluation side of it all.
So would your decision makers be the area scout or the guy above that?
The guy above that probably makes the final call and the final rankings, but he relies typically heavily on those scouts to kind of formulate the opinion, but he ultimately has the final say.
So when you're seeing scouts in the stands, it's those area guys that are really making the evaluations and making the recommendations.
So it's a combination because they may start it out and then they may invite their boss to come down and see that particular player too. So you may see multiple guys from the same organization at the same game because they want to get each other's opinion on it when it's that far down the road. But another thing you may see for really high profile players would be there's a lot of agents at the games too, because the agents also want to make sure that they're signing the top players, and so they also have to do their own scouting in some regards.
Oh,
so
they have their own scouts, so it's like literally a whole ecosystem of
So a lot of times they may already know which guys, and they don't necessarily need to evaluate them like they're going to sign them to be a major league player in the terms like a baseball team would, but they may need to do that more as like a recruiting pitch, because when you think about the Major League Baseball draft, they don't get to choose where they go. The team chooses them. But when you're talking about an agent, the player's allowed to choose where he wants to go. So then it kind of becomes like college recruiting process where you do need to evaluate the player, but you also need to recruit them and tell them what you can do for them and all those things as well.
Yeah, because I guess it's like an investment for them. It's like a penny stock.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, I'm investing into a penny stock, and hopefully this thing will be Google.
Yep, absolutely. Yep.
Tell me what's going on with San Diego Padres, man. What are they doing? It seems like they're eliminating all their hedges. They're burning all the boats.
Yeah.
Let's go all in on this thing. Are you guys, as Major League Baseball, like the teams, like looking at like, oh Jesus, that literally just happened? They got all those arms.
Mm-hmm. They've had a lot of prospects for a long time. Like in 2017, when I was in Quad Cities, which is low A, I remember Fernando Tatis Jr. on the other team, and I remember like thinking that this guy is going to be so good for the game. He brings a lot of energy. He's so exciting, extremely talented, and like he's fun to watch. And it's really good to have someone like him, be at the front of the game.
So, do you think that they're gonna make a push, like a hard push against LA?
I don't know. I mean,
I guess you can't really say.
Yeah, I mean, both teams are pretty elite, but who knows?
And also you're like, well, screw them. I want to make sure that our team's in the World Series. So I guess I get it right now.
Yeah.
Distractions are at an all-time high. What would be a priority list for a person who's wanting to reach this MLB level or college level, Power 5 type of situation? Because everyone, if a guy that wants to play college, he wants to go D1 or bust, right?
Mm-hmm.
What would be a priority list for you if you were a player?
I think sometimes we look more in the wrong direction of the outcome. Like we feel like our goal is to be Division I, which I was in that realm at that age too. But I think a lot of times it needs to be more process oriented. And I say that, and people will think like, okay, well, I work hard. I lift 5 times a week. I do this. And I think that a lot of times what's overlooked is like what's happening within that. Okay, if you're playing catch, if you're an infielder and you're playing catch 5 times a week, what is your catch play like? And then, if you asked every single player in a room, if there's a room of 100 players who works hard, every single person would raise their hand. And so then you're thinking, well, that's not really like our working hard bar is super easy to get. Like what's next? And so if we're doing a throwing program for an infielder, it's, how can I make this 10 minutes the most beneficial? Can we replicate, barehanded plays? Can we replicate on the run? Because if you're just doing that for 10 minutes per day over the course of a season, that's thousands and thousands of throws, rather than just, getting your arm loose or, moving your feet to make throws. But, where is the process within the process you already have? And I think that a lot of times, like really looking into mirror and breaking down everything that you're doing during the day, like, okay, you wake up, what was your nutrition like? Do you actually know that much about nutrition? Like looking back for me, my nutrition was very poor, and I didn't really realize that it had that big of an impact on my playing career, because I was like, well, I'm not getting fat. I'm not, I'm not like out of shape, but I don't really realize what it does to the mind and what it does to the body overall. And so I think like really breaking down the process itself, and instead of just thinking about the swing or just thinking about pitching, it's, what's everything that's leading up to that? Okay, I'm doing this in the weight room. Like, why am I doing this? Does this actually align with what my goals should be on the mound or, in the batter's box on defense? And really just breaking it down like as, detailed as possible in the most efficient manner that's possible.
You talked about the defense. You keep on saying defense, and I know how you feel. You're pretty adamant about this. I'm going to say a saying, and I want to get your initial reaction. If you hit, you don't sit.
It's true. I mean, it is true, but I always think this, like, you typically know what you have offensively from a player. Like, a player is we want to put him in the lineup because he can hit, like, we get it. But it usually comes down to, well, where's he going to play? We don't have like that many openings. Like, our best player is playing left or short or third. Like, all right, like this guy, he's above average hitter, but like, oh man, he only plays second base. It's like, again, going back to position versatility, the more positions you can play, the better it is for your career. And I just think that a lot of times it really does come down to defense because we already pretty much know what's going on offensively.
It's kind of like the Luke friend of ours, Luke Voigt, with the Yankees. He had 20 jacks it was a year ago, not this year because obviously he made a huge run with them. But he got cut. Not cut. Well, yeah. He wasn't on the roster. He was furloughed for the NLDS or NLCS. I can't remember. It's kind of that notion. And I'm thinking to myself, knowing Luke, he's probably thinking, I don't want this ever to happen again.
Right.
And that's when they started talking about outfield play and stuff like that. And he's a big body dude. Like, how do you sit? If you hit 20 jacks, if you're on a team and you hit 20 jacks, you're sitting.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to then we start to think about like, okay, what other positions can the guy play? But like, what about the other, 25, 30 years of our life? What have we been doing? Why couldn't we have learned to play, center field even though we were the best shortstop on our team? Like, where is the necessity growing up in that's, I think, overlooked because, we as coaches, as players, we always want to play the premier positions, and I agree, but that shouldn't be the only position that we play. And I think a lot of it is ego-centered. If you're a parent, you always want your kid to play shortstop or be the number one pitcher.
Or they we only pick shortstops. Well, yeah, he's athlete.
Yeah.
But also there's some other positions out there. And if he's able to play other positions outside of shortstop, because as a coach, you tell me, it would be a lot easier to teach a guy that has some recollection for right field or left field, and he's played a little bit of it, rather than, okay, I'm going to pick up a shortstop and we're going to figure out how he can play right field. Because as well as I do, some shortstops can't even read a fly ball. It's god awful.
Yeah. And I think a lot of it comes back to just having that perspective when you're younger. So maybe if you're at practice and you've only played shortstop your whole life, like take some balls during BP in the outfield just for fun. And I think what you'll find is a lot of guys maybe get bored playing the same position over and over again, and they actually may enjoy moving around the field a little bit.
Well, that's pitchers too, right?
Yeah, move them all. Yeah, give them a perspective.
And POs are out there doing fly balls. They're making dives, and like me as a center field, I'm like, Jesus, come on, guys,
move out of the way.
Let's just relax.
Yeah.
We're fine. We don't need to show off. There's no fans here. Let's just try to get through this BP session so that we can actually get to the game.
Right.
But
exactly.
Anyways, I mean, look at Mariano Rivera back in Kansas City. He actually got hurt on a fly ball situation. But what's the X factor of a player who reaches that ultimate goal?
It kind of depends. Like, there's just so many different ways and different personalities that get there, and it's tough to really kind of say like what the one X factor is. But I would say one of the things would be consistency, and I think that people have a very poor job of evaluating themselves on consistency. So one example I'll use is, all right, if you're an outfielder, you always think that you're locked in each pitch, but are you? Like, when you really think about outfield, you may be there for 150 pitches and get 0 balls, and you have nobody standing around you within 50 feet of you to kind of get you locked in. And
are you moving before the ball is even hit?
Yeah. Are you anticipating? Are you locked in on the count, the hitter? Like, what's the swing like? And I think that, we all want to believe like, yeah, I'm focused. Like buzzwords might be like work hard, focus, locked in. But in reality, are you? And,
how do you know?
And so it's tough to know. I think that's where it comes back to really like self-awareness and really reflecting on what your process is like between pitches. You get 17 seconds between those pitches. Like, what are you thinking about then? How are you using that as like a loading mechanism to the next pitch?
I always think back to that clip on ESPN where LeBron James literally recited verbatim what happened on a play in like the third quarter of a playoff game, or if it was a regular season game. I think it was a regular season game. That's what made it more impressive. I don't think there's many players out there that can recollect, oh, that guy threw me a curveball on a 2-1 count.
Right.
Or that guy threw me a 3-0 curveball just to get over. Like that type of stuff. I don't think guys really think about it that way.
Yeah, exactly. And I just think that it comes down to self-awareness and then accountability probably being two of the more important qualities to get there. And when I say consistency, it's not just showing up every day and telling somebody how many hours you put in and what you did that day. It's like, what was in that? And when you think about baseball, college baseball, you have your weekend series and you maybe have one midweek, so you kind of reload. But in professional baseball, in the minor leagues, you're playing 140 games, and you'll see guys go through certain waves of positives and negatives, and it's the guys that ultimately get there and stay there are the guys who can bring their best self as often as possible, no matter what kind of roller coaster they're going through.
Which is tough because you're dealing with the mental side of it. Are you happy? Are you sad? Are you dealing with stuff outside of the game? Did your wife yell at you or throw a plate at you or whatever the case may be, right? Or she surprised you with a trip or whatever, right? So that is very interesting. I mean, in college, it could be multiple things because you're dealing with so many hormones. Then obviously with high school players, Jesus, that's a whole worms right there.
Exactly.
I mean, I don't want to go back to high school. I don't know about you. Those times were just different. Like like I can't believe that we did this and that,
Right.
But talk about moving this needle forward on player development. Like, what's actually working right now for you that you're noticing that could possibly be an implementation for someone coaching a youth team or a college team or whatever?
It kind of depends. I think one thing, like looking back on when I was a college coach, that I wish I would have done better is had more one-on-one individual meetings with each guy, and then also have like more of like an onboarding process. So if you're a freshman, or let's say that you're a high school coach and you get a new player to your organization, how do you really make that guy more comfortable? He's coming in with a new group. Maybe he has some anxiety about that. Maybe he doesn't really know what the team is teaching, and it's like, what do we do, and at what rate can we make him feel more comfortable, and what that process is like. And I think that like for example, when we draft a player, we take them through this whole process and really looking at it from different perspectives. And we've all been that new person at a new job, and you're trying to remember everyone's name, and then your boss is wherever he's at, and it's all of a sudden it's like you're kind of figuring it out on your own, which I think there is some of that you're always going to have. But
that's a growing process too, right? You got to have a little bit of that. You can't
for sure.
You can't like coddle them into it, right?
Right. But as leaders, I think it's important to try to get to know guys on more of an individual basis and really kind of know what their personalities are like, so that you can make them comfortable as quick as you can based on who they are. And that's the toughest part for the leader too, because you don't know them, and maybe they're saying, all the right things, but they're really feeling something different. And it's, I think that's part of, human, emotional intelligence to try to read those things and put guys in the right environments. And
it goes back to that leader, right? Because we all know how and I think that's so true. It's a really good point. Like the onboarding process. I go back to my junior college coach. He was rough and tumble, and he would curse a lot, and he'd put a lot of fear into you, but then he'd build you back in and build you up. and treated every single guy that was basically you're zero right now. There's no this and that. And then I've had other coaches where it's been you're our top guy. You're the dude. I'm relying on you. This is it. And there'd be no really introductions. It was just you're my guy.
Right.
And you have Tim Corbin from Vanderbilt, who literally you don't earn the logo. You don't get the logo until you make the squad, and every guy has literally just a number and black and gold lettering, and you're not a Commodore yet. You've got to earn it.
Yeah, and I think that's just a great example of, as much as we say that we don't want to be entitled or we don't want to take things for granted, it's just human nature. You're
going to, right? We're
going to, and like when we think about this pandemic, like we never really realized like how much we enjoyed just going to dinner with, a normal environment, or, going to a sporting game where there's people sitting next to you. And, as much as we can say like, I'm not going to take it for granted anymore, it's just human nature. We are at some degree. And I think that, if we can always remind ourselves and realize like how fortunate we all really are, even during this current process.
What I've taken for granted is like face recognition.
Yeah, exactly.
Everyone's wearing masks. Like I felt so bad. There was a Tiger alumni in our gym, in the gym I was working at. I didn't recognize him because he had a mask on.
Right.
And like I totally missed him. He's like, "Did you not see me?" It's like, bro, that's like me trying to pick out Jesse James when he's robbing a train. I have no idea. He's wearing a mask. I don't know who that guy is.
Yeah.
It's like a superhero. It's like that whole thing, like where it's like Clark Kent and Superman when he puts on that suit, even though his face is there, you don't recognize him because he has a different outfit on, right?
Right.
I cannot wait until we can be in a normal type of setting where we can actually go into a restaurant and then you see somebody and be like, "Oh, hey, what's up?" And then you actually enjoy the conversation. So, pitching versus hitting development. Explain the differences and how we've gotten to this point of predictable results with throwing hard versus hitting seems like it's so unpredictable.
Yeah.
And like, because you can almost predict a guy's going to throw 100. Like, oh, that guy has fast twitch muscles. We just got to get him onto a program and he's going to throw 100. Hitting wise, I don't know if this guy's going to hit for power or not hit for power, or if we can get him power if he can actually hit a 95-mile-an-hour fastball, because there's that variable too. Does he have the eye-hand coordination? He might have the fast twitch, but does he have the eye-hand coordination?
Yeah. I think a lot of it comes down to the variables. As a pitcher, you control most of the variables. As a hitter, you're reactionary. So even if you have the best swing, it doesn't mean you're going to pitch, it doesn't mean you're going to hit. But if you're a pitcher and you have good stuff and you throw strikes, you're probably going to be successful. But as a hitter, there's so many different variables because you're reacting. The pitcher has the most power on the field, and then you have the hitter, who is then reactionary. Then you have the defense, who there's 9 of them just kind of waiting around for very low frequency events. And so each level of the game becomes way more variables, way less frequent, because then you have base runners, and then
it becomes a wicked environment rather than a predictable environment. Because I guess like in golf, you can end up it's a more predictable type of environment versus baseball.
Golf hitting would be more like baseball pitching rather than just comparing it to the hitter, because you're not reacting to anything as the golf hitter.
Except you just have courses, right? Different types of courses, and you got to teach those skills to that.
Yeah,
and you can actually teach someone to drive something. Yeah,
as a pitcher, you have different hitters, different sizes, different handedness, switch hitters, and so. But at the end of the day, you decide when to throw it. You decide, what you're going to throw, how you're going to hit it. But as a hitter, you're just trying to take your best tools inside the box and then just figure out.
Do you think like there's a point where you could teach someone how to like have power? Because like that's the big like marketing buzzwords right now. Driveline promotes, we can teach you how to throw faster as a pitcher, and they're starting to go down this hitting route, which is very impressive. Like they have a really good program. Do you think that there's going to be a point where we can actually teach power to somebody and get a higher exit velocity off of that?
I think there's some things that we can do, but it just then comes down to, will it translate in the game? from the pitching side, when things when you improve a guy's velocity, it's pretty easily translated to the game. But on the hitting side, you may do some things in the weight room or do some things mechanically that are actually increasing his exit velocity off the tee or front toss or flips. But at the end of the day, is it going to translate on the field when it matters the most? And that's like always the number one question.
Gotcha. Well, we're at the tail end of this, and I really don't know how to end this podcast because there's been a lot of information. I really wanted to do like a deep dive into professional baseball and how the hierarchy of the organization, and then also on the player development side, get a little bit more into that because we did, guys, if you haven't listened to episode 24, we digged really deep on the player development side, but there were some remaining questions that I didn't get the chance to ask Jason. So with the tail end of this, what is your closing pitch on kind of wrap this thing into a bow to give value to coaches that are listening?
I would say, there's like if you're coaching a team and there's 20, 25 players, it's your job to be parts of all of those 25 players rather than all 25 of them adjusting just for you. And then you have to do that authentically. And I think that sometimes as coaches, we may think like this is our style. This is how we do it. This is what I believe in, which is good. We need that. But at the end of the day, you have to be there for each guy as an individual first, rather than the flip side where all of them have to adjust just for you because they're the ones playing. It's all about them and it's not about us. And so I think that when you really kind of take that perspective, you may look at, your process and your development for each player and really kind of challenge, why do you do something like that? Why do the outfielders play catch like that? Why do you allow that? Where do you want to draw the line on these things? How intense do you want to be on their secondary leads or, all the little things that you may have blinders on right now. It's important to really kind of look into the each day's process, ask a lot of other people, their advice. And then, you never know. And just love each guy like they're your own.
I would say like the closing pitch to this for me and something that I've learned from you is the ego is something that you have to battle with on an everyday basis, especially in the baseball world, because there's so many guys out there that like to peacock, get their chest big. They say, "Oh, my way or the highway." Just look at Twitter. Just literally go on Twitter and scroll, and you'll see every dude that comes up with a crazy ass drill or come up with a drill that everyone wants to implement. That type of stuff. They're really peacocking themselves out there, and there's some really good guys that have really good information. But I think it's just setting back and saying, I mentioned this with one of our directors on a WebEx when we're going to post that to our Facebook account and our YouTube channel. And I said, one of the guys that I really find interesting in the finance world is George Soros. And the reason I find him interesting, and whether he's right or wrong, and that's a whole nother story if you're into the politics side of things, I'm just saying from a finance side of things, he's known to make decisions, change his mind consistently. And that's the only thing that you can really really rely on is that George is going to make an inconsistent decision where he's going to say, nope, I was wrong on here. I'm going to make this is what's right. I think that baseball needs to do that a little bit more rather than stick in their ways of this is my way or the highway. This is always going to be right till death do us part. Mm-hmm. This is how you become a better hitter. I think we need to have a little bit more of that. And just hearing you from the Astros side of things and how you're teaching is I'm setting that ego aside. I'm trying to find different ways that are actually going to work and get a guy to the show because that's what really matters. Yeah,
it's almost like consistently be inconsistent in the approach that you take.
Exactly.
Because you're always challenging it. Like sometimes I drive myself crazy because my thought that I went on a tangent for and started a project on, I'm 3 days in and all of a sudden I'm like, I don't like this at all. But I would say the old me would have just went through with it because I didn't want to waste all the time that I'd already put on it. But it's important to like kind of train your thoughts and your actions to kind of lead down that path because that's how you're going to grow the most.
Yeah, it's kind of like the price of gold, going back to investments. Price of gold. At some point, gold is going to be a really strong investment. But then at some point in time, that's going to be a really bad investment. So you got to be willing to make the decision of, all right, I'm putting my chips in. Here's all my gold. I want my money. Or, hey, I need more gold into my portfolio. It's the same. It's the same concept. And we could go different analogies on this back and forth, but definitely right. So, well, I appreciate you coming on to the show and your limited time here in St. Louis. And this might be your last hoorah in St. Louis for a while, right?
Yeah, appreciate you having me on. Yeah, I always enjoy coming home. This is where I grew up, went to college. But yeah, it's hopefully baseball is as normal this year, and hopefully I'm busy all throughout the year.
There it is. Guys, please subscribe to the show if you have not subscribed yet. If you're a new listener, welcome to the show. This is a show about people, culture, and how to create a winning lifestyle. This is more on the baseball route. There's some career stuff in there as well. Please go back, listen to episode 24 with Jason on player development. Until next time, we'll catch you later. See ya. Thank you for watching or listening or both to The Closing Pitch. If you would like to get your closing pitch featured on the show, we use a podcasting app called Anchor, where you can submit your statement or question via audio. Or what you can do is comment in the comment section of this post. We also accept direct messages. Please give us the A-OK if you do send us a DM to use your statement or question on the show. Last thing, please give us a review on your platform of choice. 5-star preferably, and we value your opinion, and this allows us to reach more people. Thank you for listening, and we will catch you in the next episode.